This is Justin.
And this is Haley, and you're listening to The Price of Avocado Toast.
We're a married millennial couple wanting to normalize conversations about money. We want to hear about your highs and your lows,
the do's and the don'ts on your path towards financial freedom. Hi Toasties, welcome to Price of Avocado Toast.
Whether you're a first-time listener or you've been following us from the start of this thing, we're so glad to have this conversation with you today. And boy, is this about to be a wild conversation. Toasties, today kicks off a 3-part series with our friend V, all about Uncle Dave. And today's guest is an absolute doozy.
Doozy in the best way possible. It's a fantastic episode. We sit down with Amy Fritz, and she is a podcast host. She hosts the Untangled Faith podcast, which is fantastic. And she has an inside perspective, very inside perspective on Dave Ramsey. Her husband actually worked for Dave Ramsey, and they have a whole entire story that they deep dive into on a 10-part series on her Untangled Faith podcast. But she shares with us on today's episode a lot about that story. And you guys all know how we feel about Dave Ramsey at this point, but we want to bring other perspectives in. So it's not just Justin, V, and I sitting down to talk about how we feel. Like, what are the other perspectives? And we surely get one.
Yeah, I was honestly surprised that we were able to land this interview. I know that their experience has been hard, and unpacking that is a lot of emotional expense. And when you reached out and were able to have Amy join us, it was like, okay, this is going to be big. This is going to be really, really important for our listeners and those who have been part of the Ramsey group, and maybe those who haven't and have only heard our story. Hearing this perspective is going to be really powerful. So I'm really, really thankful that we were able to have Amy on. I'm really thankful for her courage and her strength as her and her husband navigated all this. And I'm just thankful that we got to know her and that we now have her in our corner and that we can be in hers as well.
Yeah, me too. All right. Well, without further ado, let's just dive right into this because this is a powerful episode, and I think that we need to get right to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a long one, Toasties, but buckle up because you're going to enjoy.
Enjoy.
All right, Toasties, today we are sitting down with Amy Fritz. She's a fellow podcaster, and boy, does she have a story. And I don't want to dive too much into it before we get into the interview. So I'll just start by saying, Amy, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with Haley and V and I today. We really appreciate it.
I am thrilled to be here.
This is something we've been looking forward to for a long time because when we originally started talking about Dave Ramsey on our podcast, we had a lot of listeners that automatically were like, whoa, we relate to this. We want to know more. Let's keep talking about this. Let's keep this conversation going. And so then we connected with V to kind of create a collaboration to really deep dive into things. And we have our opinions, right? All of us have our own experiences and opinions. But we really wanted to dive into something deeper than just the 3 of our opinions. And that's why I'm so excited to sit down and talk to you, because you're going to give a different perspective from your lived experience. Like you said before we started recording, you can only speak from your experience, but it's such an important story to tell. So thank you so much for being willing to share your story.
Thank you. Yeah, I do. We have our own Dave story. You know, people say, what's your Ramsey story? Our story started in 2011 when I was looking online for a job for my husband. And I don't know if you've heard of the business speaker author, John Acuff.
Yeah.
He talks about productivity and things, and he had recently started working for Dave. And I didn't know that initially. And he had written something interesting. And I was like, oh, well, I wonder if Dave's hiring. And just so happened he was looking for software developers. And my husband loves software development. And so I said, hey, I kind of was sneaky about it. I was like, what do you think of this job? I just read it to him, didn't tell him where it was. And he's like, that sounds amazing. And so he applied, and we moved our family from Minnesota to the Nashville area. And so Nathan started working there in 2012. We were, he didn't even really know who Dave was, but he was happy to be working in a place that seemed to have a good mission. and where he could write code is like his dream come true. Writing code in a place that wants to help people. This is amazing. And so, yeah, we did that. We had some good experiences, some ups and downs, and then some really low lows toward the end. And Nathan's job, he resigned from his job in April of 2019. And by April of 2019, we had changed from 2012, super naive and excited for the Ramsey organization to really feeling very discouraged and disappointed. And we both walked away knowing that we really couldn't trust Dave and didn't believe that he was everything that he was portraying himself to be. And it's a long story. And, I could fill up much of your podcast with it, but I don't know how many details you want with that. I mean, that is the in a nutshell situation that happened. We brought up some issues that we were concerned about regarding Chris Hogan, their main speaker. I was really good friends with his now ex-wife, and she just sort of fell off the edge of the earth. And I have this little private eye inside of me that was like, something's wrong. Something's very wrong.
Yeah, I actually found Chris Hogan's former spouse on Twitter, which led me back to you. So I also have that private eye inside of me, and I like to go digging. So
yes.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah. And, she is my friend, and, I could not get a hold of her. She wasn't showing up for anything. She just ghosted me, and it was unusual. So I dug around and I was looking on Twitter, as one does. And I found something that really, really alarmed me. It was a message from somebody that basically was some Bible verses saying, hey, I like these verses. You should read them. And and something about it messing up someone's family. And I was like, this is weird. Who sends a Bible verse to somebody that probably isn't even manning his own Twitter account? And I happened to look them up, and they were about adultery. I thought, this is bad.
Yeah.
I just knew at that point something terrible had happened, and we tried to work with Ramsey to figure out what in the world was happening. And they lied and covered for Chris and told my husband that he could trust them, or he knew what he needed to do. So he did. He resigned. We really didn't say much about our experience publicly for about a year. And then in the middle of COVID shut down in April of 2020, I'm like, why not just put out there in a blog post exactly why Nathan resigned? And I was very careful in writing it, very careful in my wording, knowing that Dave can be litigious. And I just put it all out there because I thought, if I were there, I would want to know. I would want to know why. And I wouldn't want someone to later on say, why didn't you say something? So I wrote and rewrote and wrote and rewrote. And I had some like unofficial lawyer eyes look at it too. Like, have I said anything that could get me in trouble? So if you read that, you could probably see how I finessed my words and was very specific with the verbs I used. And when I quoted something, knowing that I had to be able to back that up. And then within less than a month later, we were getting a nasty letter from the general counsel at Ramsey threatening our family. And when we had never signed a non-disparagement, we had never signed a non-disclosure, we had not done anything, but they made it seem like we were doing something bad and sent it to several other of our friends at the same time. And it was really scary. I don't know how many of you have ever received like a C&D letter from somebody with a lot of money.
That would be terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, when this person has a lot of resources, I knew we had done nothing wrong. I knew we probably wouldn't, he probably wouldn't be able to do anything. And it was probably bluster. But like the next day, they set up a meeting with my husband's new employer, the CTO at Ramsey, reached out to my husband's new employer and had a Zoom meeting.
I'm sorry, what?
Yes. Yeah, they did. So my husband and a couple of his friends from Ramsey were all working together at this new place. None of them had signed a non-compete. They had not been poached away. I mean, Nathan didn't even go straight to work at this place.
I've heard a lot about non-disclosure agreements within Ramsey. So when he resigned, they didn't make him sign an NDA. Was that never even mentioned? Everything I read just says that people get like forced to sign these, and I don't really know the truth behind like what that is with the NDAs.
If somebody is going to be, I mean, if we weren't offered one, I think this happens in a situation where when they're firing somebody unsuspecting, somebody doesn't know their job is going to go away and suddenly their job is gone. So they don't have any money and they haven't planned on their income being gone. So now they're in this place where Ramsey could use leverage against them to say, hey, we want to help you. So we will offer you, severance if you sign this thing that has no expiration date on it. You can never say anything that, says anything about the agreement or anything negative about them, even if it's true. And it also applies to your agents, people that would speak like your friends and family.
We've had, so for the Toasties listening, when did I come on? In January?
I think December was it was January, because December was the episode where we sat down and we all cried. That was the episode.
That was the episode. Yeah, so I came onto the team, I guess, a month later in January, and we've been really digging into Ramsey Solutions and trying to talk to experts and people like Amy. And you don't have to go far or dig very far to get to former employees that will not speak to you, period, because of NDAs. And they are terrified. They say, nope, not going to do it. And that's that.
Yeah. They're scared. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. It's a scary thing. But we had never signed anything. And, Nathan at his exit interview, which, I would just tell people, you don't have to sign anything in an exit interview. Even if you're hoping, even if it's about benefits, you don't have to sign anything to get your paycheck that you have already earned. You don't. And if somebody wants you to sign something, just ask if you could take it home, or they can email it to you, give you time to look it over. Because this paper that we got given to us and they said, hey, can you sign this? Just verifying your signature, verifying your address. Did we actually need to sign something verifying our address? No, but it also had a little paragraph on it that said, I understand that I am held to the policies and procedures, blah, blah, blah. Which I think they thought they were going to be able to do something regarding that. But I don't really understand how we can be held to the Ramsey policies and procedures if we're no longer employed. I've never been employed there. So
yeah. Well, I was saying it just sounds like a classic Ramsey tactic of using his financial, well-being and his ego and power to kind of muscle people even after their time as an employee there. You kind of throwing that weight around, for lack of a better word, like by asking somebody, we're gonna hold you to the policies and practices as though you're still an employee here, which obviously I'm not an occupation lawyer, but like this just doesn't make sense when you first hear that. And it just kind of all lines up with what we've seen with some of the tactics of Ramsey Solutions.
Yeah. I mean, when you think like what policy and procedure would we have broken anyways? First of all, I wasn't an employee, so I'm not held to the policies and procedures. Was Nathan being held to some no gossip policy after he's no longer working there? Is he supposed to go to his leader who is no longer there? Because his leader who is no longer there actually is his leader again. At his new employer.
Nice. That's very very great to hear that they worked their way back around with one another.
Yeah. So that was, and I just have to say it was terrifying to think, we would have been fine. We would have, if Nathan would have lost his job, he would have found another one, but nobody wants to look for another job. And I was actually more scared and frustrated and sad because I felt like he was putting his boot on the neck of good friends of ours. And, because there were other people whose jobs were being threatened and that were also in on that call that work with Nathan. And at that point, I'm like, I want to de-escalate Dave, not for my sake, but for my friends. And so I took my blog post down. They didn't ask me to. I took it down for a short while. Well, for maybe 6 months or so. And I just felt like such a failure. I felt like I can't believe we let him bully us into being quiet. So we're quiet for a while until like that January of 2021, when I decided to go on the record with Bob Smetana with the Religion News Service. And I don't know if you read that, but that article changed a lot of things. And that had like the response from Ramsey was absolutely bonkers. I do not know if you read it, but they responded, the journalist asked for a request for comment, and they sent an email back that was the most horrifying, embarrassing, like it was worse than anything in the original article. They shot themselves in the foot so badly. We know of friends and employees that decided to quit because they were so embarrassed at the response from Ramsey.
Wow.
So did that response just kind of become a catalyst for you to decide that like your fear was no longer going to stand in your way of, coming on podcasts like this and doing your own and just kind of standing up to the Goliath, for lack of a better term, that is Ramsey?
Well, we'd had time to think through this, and talking with my husband about what he felt comfortable with, what I felt comfortable with. He didn't go on the record, but I did. And he felt, fine about that. If either one of us had any discomfort, we wouldn't have done it because we want to be a team in this. But we had time to think through, like, what's the worst thing that can happen? We kind of feel like some of the worst things that can happen have already happened. We gave a heads up to his employer ahead of time. Just want you to know, Nathan just wanted, as a courtesy, like, Amy talked to a reporter and we're not mentioning you in this, but we just want you to know. And we said, we understand that if this is going to be a problem and we do not want this to create a problem for you, and if we need to get a new job somewhere else, we will. And they're like, well, they really respected that, So just knowing what the worst thing is that could happen and already have gone through some of that already was really helpful. And I came to realize, really, Dave likes to operate in the dark. He wants to bully people when no one's looking. But when you put your story out there publicly, and that was nationally publicly, I mean, Religion News Service is a wire that gets picked up by a lot of other media organizations. It's not just a small business. This is big time. And I think I got picked up by the Washington Post. It was big. It was a big deal. At this point, the world has seen some really serious allegations against the Ramsey organization. What is he going to do to us? Is he going to corroborate what we've said by continuing to bully us? So by actually being really public, it was a bit of an insurance policy.
That's a great way to put it. A bit of an insurance policy.
What a genius strategy. Like, and I know it probably wasn't super intentional or anything like that, but just knowing the way that his manipulation works in his own mind, and
like
just being
people are watching.
Yeah.
That's hats off to you, Amy.
Thank you. I appreciate
That's
that.
amazing.
There's so much more to it, but I mean, that's probably the highlights and the lowlights of it.
We recently had an interview with someone, and she said it's really important to be one of the first people to speak out. It's really, really important to do that. So I'm imagining Nathan's employer, when you said, this is where we stand, this is our story, if this doesn't work well with you, that's okay, we can go work elsewhere. I would be like, wow, they're really standing their ground in what they believe to be true. This is someone I would actually want to have work for me. I think that shows a lot about yours and your husband's character.
Well, and I think it helped that at this point, Nathan wasn't brand new at this place. Like he had a little bit of a track record there. And, you know, so, I mean, if he had just started a month before, that would be a different conversation.
Yeah.
So, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, completely. For the toasties that are kind of new to this story of what Amy talked about with Chris Hogan, a personality with Ramsey, he, it was uncovered that he was unfaithful to his wife, which some people might say, well, that's maybe not a huge deal or whatever, wherever anybody falls on that spectrum. The important thing to recognize with that idea within the Ramsey company is that it is heavily based in faith and like strong ideas of Christianity. And Dave himself has kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, but like created a employee handbook of sorts that really speak to the values and moral code that he wants employees to live by. And so there was a huge ethical dilemma there with Dave maybe not holding Chris to that high standard and then covering it up and not living himself up to the own handbook that he's created.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's tricky, right? Like kind of how can a place get around the whole like faith and business thing when it's not a nonprofit, it's not a church. And in some people's minds, that's a plus, but Dave's very, very clear about what, they say their core values are. And, I have started referring to it as their stated core values because it doesn't feel completely consistently lived out. And I think that's the problem. I have a lot of problems with having rules about people's personal lives, not so much that, I don't have opinions about what might be right or wrong, but I don't know that an employer should be speaking to that. And I don't know if they're having things be a fireable offense actually helps people to live what Dave would refer to as a righteous life so much as helping people hide things.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be one thing if he consistently upheld that, but that's the thing that was a problem for us. It didn't feel like a consistent upholding. We've already seen you fire certain people. Why is this guy not being fired?
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems like it's just a method of control. And of course, he is the CEO of Ramsey Solutions, and he, as a business owner, you do have to have control over aspects of your business. But when it crosses that personal line threshold, that is manipulation and control.
Yeah. Well, I completely agree, but I think it said something about the character of what we were perceiving in the leadership at Ramsey that would say, if somebody brings in millions of dollars and it would cost us a lot of money to lose them, we're willing to look the other way. When we would fire somebody that was an admin assistant who doesn't bring, nobody knows who they are, it's not going to cost us very much to lose them for much less. That's not righteous living. It's ridiculous.
No, that's capitalism.
Yeah. Amy, you have your own podcast, Untangled Faith, and you did a very extensive series on your kind of Ramsey story, you and Nathan's Ramsey story, and you had friends on, obviously Melissa in particular, that was an integral part of this story. When you were kind of planning that series and then eventually releasing it, did you have these kind of same fears, thinking we're putting this out into the world forever and this is going to kind of live out there? Did you guys worry what that pushback was going to be at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I had moments where like, this is no big deal. People would be like, wow, I can't believe you're doing this. This is really brave of you. And then I would be like, well, maybe it is brave of me. And I would be like, what am I doing? Early on, some of the episodes, I felt like we won't get in trouble for this. Nothing could happen. But later on, there were a few, before I put the episodes out, I actually took the audio file and also sent it somewhere else. I thought, if we get sent something that shuts us down, I want someone to have access to this. And so I don't have to break some sort of, I get a restraining order put on me, which I didn't think there would be any legal justification for, but we have seen this sort of thing happen in Williamson County where, who knows, somebody in the Williamson County court system is like, all right, we'll grant this restraining order against this person, even though they're not even there in the courtroom. And so there were times I sent audio to other people. I have a file of things that I have given copies to other people if I would ever have a gag order be put on me. And these are not normal things that normal people have to do. I think that this is a reminder. If you have to do that sort of thing, you're dealing with somebody that's really abusive.
Yeah.
That was going to be my next point. It's just, this is not normal. This is like some movie stuff, like you're not dealing with a normal person. You're dealing with an extremely toxic, power hungry, manipulative human that is afraid of something getting out.
Yeah.
And that is even more of a push to be so vocal.
Yeah.
So you are brave. You are extremely brave, and we are forever in your debt that you took that leap and you decided to speak out, and your friends did and your husband did. So yeah, I definitely agree with the people that said that. Even when Haley, Justin, and I started to do our versions of the series, not that we're strictly tied to like being employed at Ramsey Solutions, but when we started talking about our experiences as baby step followers and feeling in the depths of it in that realm, people even today on our posts were like, wow, like you're really going after him, like that's awesome, like good for you, like wow, I wouldn't do that. And it's like, wow, this is, we're going up against somebody that is very terrifying.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to say in response to that, I don't want to downplay the fact that it is scary to speak the truth when somebody has a lot of resources at their disposal. On the other hand, I also want to give you a couple different things that can help you feel less scared when you're speaking the truth about somebody who has power. Number one, you can always have an umbrella policy on your insurance.
Yeah.
This costs very little.
Always.
Yes. I love that. We're a financial podcast too, so I love that. I just support an umbrella policy anyways, but that's great.
Yeah, so
that's amazing.
What does it cost you to call State Farm Insurance or whatever insurance you use? It's going to cost you $10 a month, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh,
Not very much.
You can get millions of dollars for like $20 a month.
And here's the other thing. If someone is going to sue you, the biggest defense you have in this sort of case is going to be about slander or libel, whether you're speaking or writing. Your biggest defense is the truth. My friend Melissa Hogan tells me that. She is a lawyer. Your biggest defense is the truth. Speak the truth. Anybody can sue you for anything. But if you speak the truth, you should be able to defend yourself. And somebody that is operating in the dark, somebody that is being deceitful, and I would say Ramsey has been very much so, he doesn't want to sue me.
Yeah.
Because if he does, I get to depose him. And that's his worst nightmare. He doesn't want me to have subpoena power to ask for certain things because he knows that the truth then will come out that I have not been lying.
Yeah. I want to backtrack a little bit because I'm trying to match up the timelines here. So when did Nathan leave? And then when did you finally release your blog post again?
He left in April of 2019. And it was almost a year later that I wrote my blog post saying, here's our story of leaving Ramsey Solutions.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just thought, people are at home with COVID. Why not, while people are home,
give them
share
the deeds.
story.
Yep.
And part of it was a little bit strategic, I have to say. I knew that was a time that the Ramsey employees were at home. They worked from home for about a month during early COVID days before Dave was like, we're done. We're coming back.
I find that relating to us. We decided we were done following Dave Ramsey just before New Year's of 2020. I guess it would be New Year's 2021.
Yeah, 2021.
Just before the new year. And we released our Done with Dave episode. I was absolutely terrified to release that episode for so many reasons. But I think over the year it took being out of Dave, now I feel like we're processing all of the things that happened when we were following Dave Ramsey. We were following him as just average Americans across the United States do every day when they sit down and binge his podcast for 3 hours a day, like obsessive people. That was us. And then to be a year out, I feel like finally now I'm processing what the heck happened over that time when we were following him. Do you feel like you've kind of had that processing as well? Like the longer you're out, you're like, oh, okay, now I can see very clearly what has happened.
Yeah, I mean, you have more perspective, and you'll share a story with somebody and they'll be like, hold please, that was weird. And you're like, yeah, it was, but I didn't realize it at the time.
That's a great way to put it. Like, what? How did that? I mean, listening to the series, yeah, like you hear stuff and you're like, oh my goodness, these are the people that are in it,
Yeah.
right? Like we're just, a couple out in California listening to the podcast every day and we're like, oh, that doesn't quite line up. Like, oh, that didn't feel really great hearing him say that about somebody, or, I can't imagine being in the thick of things. Like, yeah, it's a lot to unpack afterwards, which, I mean, you guys did the episode that dropped yesterday, the same day that we dropped our baby step episode, which is hilarious that it lined up like that.
I know, it's so cool. Yeah,
it was
I
so
will
good
send
though.
you. I need you guys to link to Dan Watt some of his posts that he wrote post leaving Ramsey. He was on the show with me. He worked at Ramsey for about 10 years. He left
Wow.
about a year after we did. After hearing our story, he came over, after I shared the blog post, he messaged my husband and said, hey, let's talk. And I was like, is he coming because he's mad we said something? No, he was coming to say, tell us everything. He was ready to listen. And then he made a plan to leave. But he has all the things he could tell you about trying to buy a house with a credit score after they had paid off their house. And then they moved. They wanted to move out of Ramsey land. So they had to buy a house, and trying to buy a house with no credit score, even if you have a lot of money in savings, is a pain in the butt.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's talk about reality and living in 2022.
Yeah. And does this apply to the single mom who doesn't have like many resources? And if something bad were to happen to her, if it doesn't, then these aren't like principles that are one size fits all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest, I think, from doing the series, just based off of his personal finance advice alone, separating him. That's the biggest thing. It's like personal finance is personal. It's inherent in the name personal finance. Mm-hmm. And you can't have a one size fit all, because that's just not the way that our society works. The only way that would work is if we all started at the same place in life. Mm-hmm. And we don't. That's just not the reality of America. It's not the reality of the world.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of what's motivated me in my own education, on my own platform. I think it's definitely rubbed off on price of avocado toast. I think that it's just nuance and understanding privilege and understanding how the world has changed in the last 30 years. That's really been the biggest takeaway from talking to all these people and talking about my own experience, is like, it's okay if it's different, because everybody's different.
Yeah. In the faith world, we talk about deconstruction, right? When you kind of look at your faith and think, is this really true? Well, I think the same thing applies here, is you can deconstruct this idea. What is true about personal finances? What has been helpful? What hasn't been helpful? What's good and what's bad? And let's keep what's good, and understand Dave doesn't own personal finance. He doesn't own math.
I thought he did for the longest time.
And he has encouraged a lot of people to get out of debt. He has encouraged a lot of people to change their lives for the better. Let's admit that. Let's celebrate that. That is amazing. Maybe they wouldn't have done it without him. Maybe they would have. I don't know. I am happy for the people that he helps, but I also know he has hurt a lot of people, and he's also made some people feel like failures that should never have had to carry that sort of guilt and shame. we're all looking for gurus or a system that will help us. It's natural, right? We want a shortcut. We don't want to have to think through it all. It's only natural. So to work through this, like what is good and what is bad. And I'm not just going to do something stupid despite Dave, because it won't matter to him, in the end. Like if I go and take out a whole bunch of if I spend a lot of money on a credit card that I don't need to spend and I don't have to spend, it's not going to hurt Dave. It's going to hurt me.
Right. So, like, kind of on that same note, you talked about the shame and feeling like failure, which I absolutely relate to just as a baby step former follower. Like, what steps have you taken to heal that you feel could help other former Ramsey followers?
Well, part of it is that separating the good from the bad. Um, what was true in this and what wasn't true in it. What messages have you sort of absorbed? Think through that. And were they ever true? And maybe they weren't. And I think what you're doing and processing here with the Toasties and Haley and Justin, that is one of the most powerful things, is you're talking in community with people who can give you feedback, and you can all be like, oh yeah, okay, that was weird. We can do something different. Learning about narcissism has helped me too, because there's no end to gurus in the world that want to tell you that they have a plan. And, the financial world is full of that. Doing your best to resist becoming that is a good antidote to that. You're bringing goodness and kindness into the world, not anger and legalism. And just knowing that finances are one part of our lives, a big part of our lives, but only one part of our lives. And is the goal in life really to be a millionaire? Is that going to solve your problems?
I've always wanted to ask this question, and we might not even include this in the podcast, but do you feel like Dave sees that he's turned himself into an idol?
That's a good question. I don't think that unhealthy people see themselves as unhealthy.
That's a really good way to kind of summarize it up.
If you ever think, oh, I think I might be a narcissist, I think I might be unhealthy, you can know for sure you aren't a narcissist.
Yeah.
There's no introspection there. I think it's just a pride and that hubris that says we have it figured out. I mentioned in one of my podcast episodes that after Nathan left, I'd read a lot about like cult thinking and institutional narcissism. Now we've known a lot that, individuals can be narcissists, but the idea that it could seep into a system was new to me. And reading like this study about Enron and how they actually used to, they were working with Arthur Andersen, and they were very well regarded. And they were even teaching people how to run their businesses with integrity. And because of that, nobody inside thought they could possibly be doing something wrong, because they're teaching people how to be good. And I think, it's like Ramsey, they've come to this point, like, how can they admit that some of the things that they have done could be harmful or wrong, or that they are doing something the wrong way, when they have made millions of dollars telling people that this is the way to do it? Mm-hmm. Through their Entree Leadership book, through their Entree Leadership Summit, Master Series, all their programs, all of their books. Like when you've sold so many books saying these are the steps, how do you change them? But if we're good people, and I talk about this in the context of being a person of faith. I believe what the Bible says, that we are imperfect people. And that has to apply to our knowledge of things. The Bible says we see through a glass darkly. That means that we are wrong about some things that we don't know that we're wrong about. And so it means we have to hold all this with an open hand that says, I think this is the way it works. I think this is true. But I might find out later I was wrong. And so that should impact how we treat people. And it should definitely impact the way that we interact with people in regard to their finances. Because what if I'm wrong?
Yeah. And you have to have the introspection to be able, and the flexibility to be able to change. And I think to your point earlier, like Ramsey or Ramsey Solutions just will not allow that introspection because it threatens their bottom line. So
maybe part of it is it doesn't make good. Is it a good quote on Instagram or a good soundbite when they're using nuance? People love Dave's rants.
Mm-hmm.
They love when he goes off. Those are the things that people listen to. Those are the clips that they pull out and highlight. And I think, why would you highlight that?
There's a very funny idea about like people liking Dave's rants and stuff, and there being like a no gossip clause with the company. Like I just find that like there's a very funny connection there, that like that's what Dave is like. All of his top 10 YouTube videos are probably Dave rants, and then there's no gossiping at the company. That's
because he's ranting about something that somebody's done that's irritating him, but he probably didn't go to them personally.
Yeah.
Did he go to Joe Biden and tell him his actual thoughts about the tax policies?
Yeah, right.
Did he go to him first?
Okay, so Amy, we have a famous last question that we ask everyone when they come onto our podcast. And I want to kind of twist this for a Dave Ramsey perspective. So if you could put a stop sign on someone's post-Ramsey recovery, what would you stop them from doing?
That is a great question. I touched on this earlier. I think I would say you are going to be tempted to look for another one-size-fits-all plan. There isn't one. That's the secret. I'm sorry to tell you, there is no easy 1, 2, 3 step or 7 steps, however many steps.
You got to find what works for you.
Yes. You're going to be, and you may be like, you know what, Dave, I'm so mad. I'm just going to I'm going to go buy that new car.
Mm-hmm.
I would hesitate. I would just wait a little bit. Don't take out a loan to spite somebody that doesn't care about you and will never know, who
that
you
you
are.
Stuck it to him.
Or what you did. If you need a new car, that's a whole other thing. Yeah.
And we can talk about that, but
yes,
yeah.
That's that'll be another podcast. Yeah. It's easy to want to be reactionary in this sort of thing. Like as you are coming out of it, our brains we want a leader, we want a shortcut. Try to resist it.
Right. Well, Amy, can you please tell the Toasties where they can find you, where they connect with you, and where they can view more of your work?
Sure. I do have a website. It's untangledfaithpodcast.com. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook as Untangled Faith. I'm Faith Untangled on Twitter. I don't know how I got that backwards there, but I'm on Twitter a lot. I am on Instagram quite a bit as well. And I would love to interact with anybody. I am guessing the people that are listening to me, that listen to you all, are probably going to be interested in our Ramsey story. And so if you, anywhere you find podcasts, obviously people listen to podcasts because they're hearing my voice right now. Just look for Untangled Faith. Our Ramsey story starts on episode 17. So you can binge through all of that and tell me what you think.
It's definitely binge worthy.
And
it is wild.
I just want to add that your podcast was healing to listen to from the perspective of a follower. And the untangling of the faith aspect of your podcast, because I feel like following Dave Ramsey made me feel all sorts of way about faith. And then we stopped following Dave Ramsey. And then I was like, well, now what? And then listening to your podcast, it was really healing to hear not only I'm not alone feeling this way, there are other people that were feeling any sort of way, and the people that were in it also felt some sort of way. I don't wish that on anyone, but it was healing for me to listen to that. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing. It's good work for sure.
Well, thank you. I have a friend that has a t-shirt she had made that said, I am a love your neighbor Christian, not a storm the Capitol Christian.
Oh.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Man, that is beautiful.
I want to co-sign that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say before we hop off, like, that's really the entire reason that all of us are talking, is to form a community where you can say, oh, I'm not alone in feeling this. Like, this was normal for the situation I was in. And it's been very healing to talk about this with Haley and Justin and now Amy and our guests and former followers. And it's really important work that you are doing, Amy, and I'm just very honored to have met you.
Thank you. I feel likewise, V and Haley and Justin. This has been great.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, we won't take too much more of your time, Amy, but keep doing what you're doing. And Toasties, go follow Untangled Faith because the story is absolutely wild and it's incredible. So, Amy, thanks so much for sitting down with us today.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to The Price of Avocado Toast. If you vibed with this episode, share it with a friend that you're comfortable having money talks with. And if you don't mind, we'd love if you could rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
If you're in need of my support as a financial coach, message me on Instagram. I'd love to help in any way that I can. Until next time.